Welcome, Tiny Hands, Big Dreams, here in the homestead in southern Ecuador. There's nothing else to talk about this week except for the hurricanes. Like, there's stuff, we're gardening, there's house updates, there's all eyes on North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, the South in general.
There's Hurricane Helene, which is devastating. There's also, we're watching Hurricane Milton that is going to be incredibly devastating for Florida.
It is right now
hours.
Tickling the shore of Florida and about to lay waste.
Yeah, it's going to be real bad.
So,
I have been watching a lot of people talk about preparedness and how this has been a huge wake-up call for them, either because they were on the outskirts of the worst of the destruction, or because they've watched it and realized they're ill-prepared for such an event. Not that you can be prepared. I mean, I guess we should preface that. We are very aware there are certain people that could not have done anything to prepare in any real way.
They were prepared. They had high ground. They had supplies and stuff.
And this was so beyond that.
This was the 1,000-year event that you didn't know was even possible.
But there are a lot of people who were not as directly affected, but were without power or water or any sort of communication or a lot of access,
medication
for weeks, days, weeks. So I guess that's more the kind of people we're sort of talking.
So the first step when something that terrible happens is flee. Your preparing is done. Flee. Grab what's important and go be safe. The next step, if you're somewhere safe waiting the storm out, thinking about what could we have done better, or you're somewhere the storm hasn't hit and you're like, wow, this is terrible. We should spend some time and energy making sure that if it happens, we are better prepared.
And I guess that's something that is perhaps Helene more than all the other hurricanes. Hurricanes are not, it's not new.
No.
But because this happened somewhere where it is not common. This was a bit of an extra level of I don't know, sudden awareness everyone had of something horrible could happen even if it doesn't normally happen here.
Yes.
Yes. Everyone who lives in Florida should sort of have their plan, because this is commonplace. They understand this is going to happen. North Carolina, not so much.
They're not coastal. They're on the other side of the mountain.
I think that this is something very important to start talking about, being prepared, even if you think you don't need to be.
And there's a lot of ways to prepare. There's some things that cost nothing that you just have to be told, like, hey, you should do this, and you'll be much better off. And then there's spending a little bit of money to get a whole bunch of actual resources, and then there's a little bit more, and then you're like really well set off. And then there's people that live in an old missile silo with, a nuclear power station underneath them. Like, that's another video. We won't go there. So
what's like the first level?
So there's basic levels of preparedness. And we've talked before about some of the simple things you can do. And I guess for the people whose houses simply left even when they weren't on the river, that's the bug out bag. And there's lots of people who discuss what goes in the bug out bag.
A lot of it we honestly disagree with, because I look at some of the things they put in and go, what are you going to do with that?
I would put in a waterproof thingy, official documents, deed to your house, your insurance policies, your birth certificates, marriage, passports. It is really hard to deal with the government to get those things when you don't have those things to show them to get the things. You're just I have nothing.
I think about people who have literally no documentation of their existence. And at some point you're going to need something, and you're going to have something else to prove that something to.
You're hosed.
Oh, that's just a headache that you don't need to have.
Waterproof binder, and they exist. All documents of officialness go in there. Do you have like heirloom jewelry things? And the rest of it is sort of like medications to survive on.
Someone had these are all, a lot of these things have come to mind because we've watched some of these videos.
Do you have a stockpile of cash or precious metals that you could stuff in there?
Or something like contacts. you're gonna need, you have to be able to see the things that you need
Oh,
to
yeah.
just basic sustain your existence or any important documents. Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, some beef jerky, some water, a spare pair of socks.
Flashlight would be
A flashlight.
gosh.
I have a bag and I carry it a lot of places. It's a Camelback. I don't always fill the bladder in it, but there's always a certain amount of kit. And at some point, I even exploded it out onto my bed and laid all the bits out and showed all the things I carry. And some of them are tiny. Zip ties. You know, I have like 3 like 8-inch zip ties. I have prepared so many random things for random people. From oh my gosh, my shoe blew apart. I can poke little holes and I can emergency repair your shoe so you can get back. This was at Burning Man, like so you don't get ply up in your foot and dissolve your skin. You know, some ibuprofen and a tiny little magnifying glass with a pair of tweezers. Sometimes you just need to see a tiny thing, or you know, to deal with a wound. We use them on a daily basis. Very small things, and you can put together these little kits of like. That's it. You're on foot. It's what you can carry. That's a bug out bag. All right. That should be sort of everybody, because that happens when you didn't prepare for what's coming or there was no way to prepare.
Or all of the rest of the preparations that we're going to talk about don't really apply because your house is going to leave. There's a point where it doesn't matter if you don't have power if you don't have a house.
The bug out bag is the lifeboat. And as they say in sailing, you always step up to the lifeboat. You don't ever get in the lifeboat if it's not a step up. Because whatever you're in is better. Until that point, if it's gone down, you step up to your lifeboat and you flee. So what can you do to prepare? Gosh, we live off-grid. We are our own everything. We have all of our own stuff. Power. We have a solar power system, which I recommend having one of even a very small size to charge critical, just your phone. If you at least have a phone, if there's cell service, that's a lot of difference. You can communicate, you can coordinate, you can find a hotel, you can tell people that you have no gas.
You tell people you're alive, you exist.
Sure. There's a lot of things that can be done with that. You can power lights, you can recharge flashlights, a rechargeable flashlight. I like the
Nebo?
Nebo. I was about to say Nemo. I'm like, that's a fish. Nemo Slim. It's a square flashlight. It has a low setting for 10 hours. It has a bright setting. I wish I were the importer and could sell the things where we are. I would make a mint. Awesome. They're amazing. That is all we use here.
We've had one last far longer than it was supposed to on low.
Yep.
It was like 12 hours.
Yep.
It's still going.
And it's enough to light up everything around us and dig out of the mud. So that's basic. You can store some water. The 5-gallon water jugs, like the Alhambra jugs, or I don't know, whatever they call them here, they're the 5-gallon clear, like barrel jugs.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's purified water. We refilled ours. We put a little iodine in it to kind of shock treat it, because we have some biologicals in our water. But you can buy those, and you can set a couple of those somewhere in a dark place. Guess what? 2 of those, you have 10 gallons of fresh drinkable water. You could fill a bathtub, because then you could flush a toilet.
So I guess some of this is wherever you are, what is your weak point?
Sure.
So when I was growing up, we had a well. It's like a neighborhood well. When the power went out, we had no water. This was my childhood. I didn't perhaps understand until adulthood, when I lived somewhere else, that hey, most people in a city still have water in the car. That's cool. Didn't know. So we would, storms coming, we would get wind storms occasionally. We'd fill the bathtub with water so you could flush the toilet. That was it.
Yeah, it's not drinkable. You could boil it to cook with it.
Ours were always such short time frames of no power that it was just to flush the toilet mostly. But you fill your pots, you fill every vessel you can fill if you know something's coming.
Sure.
It's not ideal, but it is something. Then there's, again, a lot of this came from like things I have watched from people and their experiences. One was they couldn't flush their toilets because their particular septic system was, their septic tank was lower than their leach field, so they had to pump up the leach field. Well, the pump does not work without power.
I lived in a house where we had a tank below the house that pumped up to the city sewer line.
Which has the same problem then, yeah.
And if the power went out, that tank filled up in like one shower or 8 flushes or something.
It's not like a seriously large tank.
No, it's like a little fat drum.
That's gross.
Yeah.
Or you have a well and it needs...
Yeah, wells take a lot of power to run. Now, I got a friend locally. There's power outages here in Ecuador. They're 8 hours or 5 hours twice a day, depending on where you are. It's a huge pain. They're saying it's going to go till January. They have a little restaurant. They just started, and that's their only source of income. And since he just got in a motorcycle accident and is laid up for a year, that is sort of, they're super relying on that more than they were. Their business has dropped off because there's no power. There's no lights. It's dark in the restaurant. Nobody will come in. He goes, well, I need to get, the lights on and run the fridges and stuff, and I need a solar panel. I'm like, hold up. Magical solar panel, one, does not magically power restaurant. What do you really need? So I went and I talked to him, and okay, we gave up on the fridges. I'm like, you need a big system. You need a 3,000 watt inverter. You need big batteries to run 2 giant commercial fridges and a freezer thing, something. Like, what do you really need? I need 8 LED light bulbs. Okay. Now this is becoming economical. What does it take to run just lights, basically, for his restaurant so they can cook, they can serve food, and then there's one in the bathroom. And I said, well, you can get an inverter for about 20 bucks, pretty much anywhere. They're tiny little things. They're 150, 200 watts. You can run it off any old car battery. And then you just need a little battery charger that you plug in. This is not a solar system. This is just a battery backup. The solar panel, you have to think of it, you live on a battery, and the battery is your energy. The solar is just there to recharge the battery. He really just needed, as much as I love solar, a battery backup. Run the lights, and when the power comes back on, it will recharge the battery, and tomorrow we'll do it again. And again, and again. And he's like, well, how much is the system? And I'm like, well, he said he could get an old truck battery from a friend. I'm like, that's great, you get that. 20, 30 bucks for the inverter, maybe another 20 for a little charger. It's as simple as it gets. There's no safeties, there's no fuses, low voltage cutoff, there's no fanciness. It's like you just kind of clip things together, but it will run the lights, they can keep the business open, the family may survive.
Yeah.
It is not hard to set that kind of thing up. A friend of mine set up a much bigger version of that. He actually got a big inverter charger, an all-in-one kind of unit. It's several thousand watts, and he got big lithium batteries. The only thing he would need is some solar panels, but he doesn't want to put up a big solar array right now. He's renting a house, but he really wanted the battery backup for his computers, which are necessary for his business. So he did. So he's into it, like $4 or $5 grand, but he will have this giant battery backup so that he can continue to make money off his computers. There's levels. There's levels to everything, but you can do it really cheap. Backup power, important for certain things. Backup food, yep, backup food and water.
Go back to power for a second.
Sure.
Because kind of what everyone's been doing is generators. I mean, it's an option. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a backup generator for the occasional short power outages that happen. But when you're talking about extended outages, what a lot of people are struggling with is either having the fuel to deal with it, or they're literally just running it like every few hours because they're trying to keep all of their fridges and freezers cold. Sure. It's not ideal, and it's not going to be a long-term answer. Generators
eat a lot of fuel. They just do, even the most efficient. It's a motor that's running. If you have a fridge and a freezer and you have like all of your meat and things and you're well stocked, and the power is going to be out for 3, 4, 5 days, you're going to lose it all.
Well, unless you have
a generator.
Yeah.
And then yes, turning it on and running it for an hour every 4 is a legitimate way to do it. If you have a generator, 10, 15 gallons of gas stockpiled, which goes bad. A little bit of stabilization treatment will help. Storing it in a cool, dark place. Change the gas out every 6 months.
And that's true of a lot of this. There's a lot of people who just prep and leave things for a very long time. Most things shouldn't be left for years. Most things.
If you run your generator, say it's great, and stick it in the garage, and you didn't drain the gas out of the carburetor, it's not going to work the next time you touch it. You have to know. Drain the gas out of the carb. There's either a little drain, or you just have to shut the fuel off and run it out. Now, when you put good gas back in it, it will magically work. It'll work every time, work years in the future. But you got to remember like little things. You got to remember to change out your gas. Put a date with like a luggage tag on the gas. 6 months, stick it in your car. Car will mix it into the tank. It'll burn up. Put fresh gas in the gas cans.
Some of this preparation takes a little bit of maintenance, which most people don't think about. I don't think I ever thought about that before. But seeing just our life and needing to maintain things, because we are sort of always in a perpetual state of prepared.
With digital devices, you can set yourself reminders of like every 6 months, like a birthday, but twice a year, this thing happens. You could have
refill this
binder checklist of like emergency things of, oh wow, like we took that beef jerky camping and now we don't have it in our emergency kit. Replace it.
Yeah. There's
a lot of things that can be done though, to prepare yourself in case of.
So food. Most people know to be prepared with food. That's sort of simple. I think that there's some details to that people miss. A lot of the prepping food is woefully terrible. It's bad. I don't have a nicer way of saying that. Do you disagree with me? Do you disagree, sir?
Give some examples.
Well, aside from it not particularly tasting good, which sometimes you just need morale to be a little higher. You need some things that are delicious. You also need calories. You need protein. And I think protein gets missed whenever anyone is talking about prepping. I don't know, what's the right word? Stockpiling, perhaps.
Sure.
You've got your grains and your canned vegetables, that's not important. If you're talking about actually needing food, because you can't get food, you're stuck, you're cut off, you can't cook because you don't have power. That's another thing. Having a gas stove is very handy.
Sure.
If you don't have a gas stove in your house, have a camp stove. You do a lot with a camp stove.
I set my mom up with one because I realized she had nothing, and if the power goes off, she loses her everything. And I gave her, I don't know, they come out of China. They're these little butane stoves that you can get like kind of anywhere now. They use them for catering and events, I think. And they take like a hairspray can of butane, which are cheap. I used to get them in the Asian Mart. It's $20 for the stove. Has a beautiful adjustment up and down. You can go down to super small to like roaring boil. The little cans last a good long time. And I said, look, here's a stove, here's a 3-pack of the cans, and here's a bag of rice. Whatever else you have in cans in your cupboard from who knows when, plus some rice and your ability to boil water. You have a swimming pool. If the water stops, you can boil the swimming water. Like, it won't kill you. It's chlorinated. But it's better than no water.
Yeah.
And you can boil it.
And being able to boil water is important.
And that was the
being able to cook becomes important. Can you go, 24 hours just eating random stuff? Yeah. At some point, you need to cook a meal, especially if you have children who eat on a constant and annoying basis.
You all believe in fasting as a health alternative. And look, some people say it works. I'm not opposed to it.
I'm sorry, the dubious face.
She's opposed to it.
I'm opposed to it.
At some point, I may try it.
Some of us need more caloric input than others on a more regular basis to maintain. And sometimes people get too stuck on the survival. And while that is, in some situations, you are just critically trying to survive, if you are potentially without power, water, etc. for weeks, at some point you'll just all hate each other. And you need to not hate each other. You need to keep morale up because whatever situation you're in is probably not great. So if you can prepare yourself with food, because whether you want to believe it or not, I know some people don't care what they eat. If you have some things that you, especially your children, enjoy, it's going to make the experience less bad.
If you had a bunch of canned, some sort of meat in a savory sauce,
Stew.
and a box of dehydrated mashed potatoes,
Sure.
dehydrated potatoes, you could have delicious meat, potatoes things, something you could warm it up. Oh,
That goes a very long way. A warm meal when you are dealing with whatever this calamity has presented you, that goes a long way.
Yeah. People have barbecues is kind of a normal thing.
Yeah.
Have a spare propane. Have the propane you're using. Always have a full spare.
Yep.
Because you're like, oh yeah, well we had a big barbecue thing. I didn't think about it. Yeah, there's only like this much gas in that tank.
Yep.
Always have a spare.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you always have at least one whole tank. You can cook on it. Some of them even have side burners if you're fancy.
Oh, not been that fancy.
I know.
I think that food, while it is the most common thing to stockpile for preparation, I think it's just sort of overlooked in its, I don't know, its importance. You're like, oh, I just have this food to eat. Okay, do you want to eat it? Because there's a lot of people that they put food away and it's disgusting. And then if something happens, you're like, oh God, I have to eat that.
We had, how long did we threw it out finally? The emergency food that
Which
was
emergency food?
That we had like in the freezer.
Oh, that was loud.
Sorry, we have these little tiny wasps. We don't know where they're coming from, and they've suddenly like homed near us. And our lovely production studio here doesn't yet have maybe screen around it. So I have a racket. Like
they're cruel.
That's my $5 answer to the wasp.
Sorry, but I don't want to get stung anymore.
And they literally just come up and sting her. They'll fly around me. They literally just sting her for no reason. She smells good.
Or bad. I'm not sure which one.
Or bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but food. Oh yeah, we've had food sitting around for a long time. We had some canned food.
That was it.
We drove around. I think we moved it across the whole country.
We moved it 3 times. We're like, well,
we'll keep it.
It's still food. It's still preserved correctly.
And let me tell you, it didn't matter what situation we were in, how poor we were.
We could eat the emergency food. So fasting.
We're just like, well, I'll figure out something else.
Yeah, it was.
So have food that you want to eat. Because it will go a long ways in just the general morale of the situation.
And no, it has to be changed out every so often. Cans of tuna, totally great. They last a few years.
Cans of corned beef, good too.
Corned beef is good.
And if if you're going to can your own food, you have a ton more options then.
You can make
it much more what you want.
The dried food, I would go bulk. Your dried potatoes, your dried eggs.
Yeah, I wouldn't do any of the like packaged prepper food. If you look at the ingredients, it's disgusting.
Your camping food, prepper food, it's really expensive. It's small portions.
Honestly, it's filled with a lot of junk that isn't actually going to help you all that much in life.
Yeah.
Nutrition is important, and I don't think that you should just forsake nutrition just because you're in an emergency, because you really need it the most when you are under stress. You don't want to get sick. The last thing you want is like some sort of illness.
Well, if you start undereating, your body starts to break down its own cells for energy, fat cells, and even other cells if you're short on protein. And it also then releases whatever stored toxins are in your body. On a normal basis, you're not doing that. If all of a sudden you start breaking down your cells, if you're in a period of low eating, all those toxins flush into your system. You will have the flu symptoms. Yeah. And I've seen people go through this. It's part of a detox flush.
You don't want to be doing that.
And they're very ill.
Or even, I just meant like, if we were in the way we normally eat with very whole foods, to then just go eat some sort of weird prepackaged dried food thing, we would not feel well.
No, it's better than nothing, but
it's something to consider.
Something to consider.
Yeah.
So, other methods of preparation. as people have been posting, there is great comedy tragedy. I'm not sure which category it falls in. FEMA sends battery-powered chainsaws to places that have no power. How far does that get you? How many cuts before the battery's dead? Did it come charged? Can you recharge it? No. Comedy or tragedy? Right. So,
Experience.
and then other people who have posts up of like things that were not useful.
Okay, well, we're not gonna get political.
No, but the electric car, my debit card, the electric chainsaw, anything that relies on the grid, like a just-in-time inventory of system, all failed.
It's not helpful.
What actually worked? Things that stored it in your court. Cash. Cash works.
There's a lot of people that don't ever have cash anymore.
Fuel in your gas tank. That's yours. That's yours to do whatever. There's people running out of gas before they can even flee Milton in Florida. The gas stations are out of gas. People are getting stuck on the side of the road. You're going to sit in traffic and use way more gas than you thought. Should have filled that tank. Should have had a spare. So put it in your, so gas, store the energy in you. Don't expect to go and buy food at a restaurant somewhere. Have your own food.
Yep.
Those kind of things.
There's also the medical side of things. We can't go in depth on the YouTube, but we are going to be doing videos on taking your medical needs into your own hands. And those are we're starting up a membership sort of platform for the videos that are not YouTube friendly, as we have learned.
They don't allow it? That's fine.
So pretty much the only thing we can say here is you should not rely on others for such things.
And there's ways to take it in your own hands and take care of your family and be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Check back for when that launches.
Yeah. Because that's important too. There's no call the doctor when you're stranded or you don't have a phone or yeah. And in a larger sense, that was the other thing I wanted to say. So Starlink. Lots and lots of questions on all the forums about before all of this happened, what do we do for internet off grid? And I always say Starlink is a good option. Yes, it is expensive depending on where you are in the world. It differs. People who said, I had no cell service, but I had power because I had solar or I had a generator or I had something.
Yep.
And my Starlink worked. And I could communicate. I could figure out what was going on. I could talk to people. I could tell people I was still alive. I became a lifeboat of communication for my neighbors because I had connectivity. We are talking to you through Starlink right now. Yep.
That's how you're getting this video. In town, there is no power, no communications. That's it. You can go and buy some bread and a Coke and a thing and go down the street and do whatever.
You can't talk to somebody in another town.
No. You
just can't.
But the Starlink continues to function as long as whatever is attached to doesn't fall down.
Well, there's that. I
would suggest putting it on a big steel post in cement in the yard.
I'm not saying everyone's going to get Starlink, but if you are considering really wanting to set yourself up to be super prepared, to be very off-grid, no, I know some people are going to say, well, having internet's not being off-grid. Poop off. I'm tired of it. Because I get it. Your off-grid is this giant question mark of everyone has their own opinion. For us, having internet is important. For most people, having internet
is how you know we exist. For you to make the comment that you're not off-grid enough.
How you make the comment.
If we didn't, so that's...
You can tell we get annoyed by that.
That's just part of
But it also allows communication. We don't have cell service where we are. Just don't. We would have zero communication without it. And
I just saw that the FCC approved an emergency measure to let Starlink provide cellular to internet or direct, like satellite to cellular.
Oh,
I think it was T-Mobile.
really?
The system, apparently they've been rolling out all sorts of technology in the Starlink network that they haven't made public. And the occasional tweet comes out from Musk of, he's like, oh, well, just wait till we launch the inter-satellite communications with laser communications so they can satellite to satellite information, which means they don't have to go to the ground to go through the undersea cables. If there's an interruption, a cable cut, a major power outage, guess what? The satellites can communicate with each other.
That's cool.
And now they apparently even have direct to cellular. And so they got to deal with T-Mobile to where they've turned it on for a like emergency short use permit thing. And they've even said like, look, it's not production time. It is still in like kind of its beta testing, but they turned it on in the emergency areas.
But gosh, beta is better than nothing there.
And all of a sudden people's phones start working.
Oh,
And
that's
it's
amazing.
because someone nearby has a Starlink.
Wow. I mean, that's cool. I had
Right?
no idea.
Exactly.
That's exciting.
So they that kind of stuff, gosh, you're not stuck there. Like Asheville, it's going to take them forever to rebuild the infrastructure
Yeah.
in the surrounding areas of Western North Carolina.
There's a lot of videos we're seeing where
There's not even the earth
Nothing.
left to run new cable and conduit through, and all the other cable and conduit and
It's just
fiber
laying out
is just
there.
laying out in the river. Like, you have to replace the earth to put the cables, to do the connections, to put the substations, to the...
This is not a short-term thing for a lot of communities. It's a long process.
It is.
Yeah. And no, not some of this stuff wouldn't help in some of these situations. But there's also a lot of people who are affected on a smaller level who could have been more prepared.
Yeah.
And most of them are realizing it. I'm seeing a huge amount of people talking about, I need to be more prepared. Like, we need to set up backup plans. We need to be more secure in what we're doing.
If you had at your house, wherever your house may be, a small generator, a quantity of fuel to run in it, a tiny, a single solar panel with a small inverter, because most of your power usage is going to be cell phones and things and small, you can run off the battery and the little solar panel, and the generator gets left until you really need it. You turn it on every so often, maybe you keep a fridge cold. You might go weeks on 10 gallons of gas. Having a fridge, being able to cook, doing things, with a propane tank of gas. Is it off grid? It is for a minute.
And that's really what most people need. And if you want to go fully off grid, that's a whole other conversation.
It is. And we enjoy
great.
that. And we're doing that here in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon highlands.
But we're also aware that not everyone wants to or is able to do that. But all this stuff you can do, and most people are like, well, it's hard to prepare if you're like in an apartment or no, you can still do all of these things. You can still do most of these things, at least.
You can do most of them.
If you have a balcony, you can set a generator out there.
Yep. Yeah. The smallest generator you can buy is probably the best deal. They have little 1,000-watt ones. Gosh, at one point they were $120 for the little generators. Harbor Freight one. I had it. I don't even know what I did with it. Maybe we gave it away. Yeah, it's a little 2-stroke generator. It was like $100, and I used it for years as an emergency backup. Works fine. Ran a fridge.
Yeah, and that's all you need.
And that's what you need. So emergency preparedness. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of answers. You can come up with a better answer than just, oh my gosh, everything's not working and we're stuck. Don't be stuck.
No.
Be resilient. Be resourceful. Be slightly prepared. And maybe all it takes, proactive. And maybe it just takes somebody prompting you like, hey, here's this video of just some good ideas on how you can get started really easily to help secure you and your family. And watching it on TV is what drives it home. Not, I'll be off grid when I need to. That's when you can't.
Yeah.
And that person has actually admitted that was a huge folly that we make fun of so much. But I've heard that from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'll do it when I need to, or oh, it's too expensive now. So well, it's a lot more expensive when you lose, your fridges and your freezers full of meat.
Oh, like, yeah.
Ooh, that's a lot more expensive. So putting some of that money up front,
and I don't
suddenly
know,
becomes a little bit more reasonable.
Counting on some sort of larger entity government for assistance.
I think we're seeing how that is not going to work out.
Yeah.
So I think that you should take it into your own hands to be prepared and take care of yourself.
We think so. We do it. And
there is no government backup here. There's
no,
nothing.
no. It's really, you're on your own. Double-edged sword. You're on your own. You can do what you want, but you're on your own. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope this was informative. I hope it was useful. I'm happy to answer questions about any of it, or if you have questions about how you could prepare in your situation, yeah, throw them in the comments. We'll respond to them. And as always, appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't, and we hope to see you for the next one.
There's a happy little tail. Oh, yeah. That's what you want to see.